How can we recognize we're in an optimum metabolic state?
My roommate found me unconscious. My oxygen levels were under 80.
How did it mold your future life? Because it happened at a very young age.
I had tumors throughout my entire abdomen.
How did you fight this?
With cancer rates going up exponentially, it's now a matter of a flip of a coin. Battling it mentality is probably not enough or not the right path to take.
How does that, in relation to the diet that we consume, is important?
And our choices of our diet and our lifestyle can impart that wisdom onto how our genes express. Your stamina is really poor after a workout. If you are tired after a meal, finish dinner at 7 p.m. and not have anything but water until 8 a.m.
Every year, billions are spent searching for the genetic causes of cancer. But what if everything we have been told about cancer for the last century is fundamentally wrong? For decades, the world has operated under a single, terrifying premise. Cancer is a genetic lottery. A random typo in your DNA. Absolute bad luck. But what if cancer is not a genetic disease, but a metabolic breakdown? Imagine fighting an enemy for 100 years, only to realize you completely misunderstood its identity. While billions are poured into tracking genetic mutations, a silent, aggressive driver hides in plain sight, right on our kitchen counters. Sugar. Nearly a century ago, Nobel laureate Otto Warburg discovered a bizarre anomaly. Cancer cells have an insatiable craving for glucose, consuming it at an accelerated rate to fuel their growth. This foundational concept is documented extensively in research on the Warburg effect. But how deep does this link go? Does sugar merely fuel the fire, or is it the spark that alters our cellular landscape? If sugar is the lifeblood of a tumor, must we completely strip it from our existence? Or is there a precise metabolic intervention that can deliberately starve the disease? This is where the paradigm completely shifts. By forcing the body into a state of ketosis through a low-carbohydrate, high-fat protocol, we can fundamentally disrupt the fuel supply to glucose-dependent tumors. Research suggests ketogenic diets may influence cancer-related metabolic pathways and may serve as a supportive tool alongside standard treatment. This raises a powerful question. Should we eliminate sugar when fighting cancer, or is there a smarter way to eat that supports the body during treatment?
Welcome to another episode of Khan Klinics. I'm your host, Dr. Amir Khan, and today we are joined by a visionary naturopathic oncologist and best-selling author, Dr. Nasha Winters. Doctor is a globally recognized integrative oncologist, expert, cancer survivor, an educator, and a best-selling author based in Durango. She currently serves as the CEO of Dr. Nasha Inc. and is a leading force behind the Trend the Terrain movement, which focuses on personalized metabolic health, cancer care, practitioner education, and terrain-based medicine. She is the co-author of the Metabolic Approach to Cancer, a widely influential book exploring how the body's internal environment works. Dr. Winter, welcome to Khan Clinic.
Oh, it's so wonderful to be here with you, Dr. Amir. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. So, Doctor, let's start with your story. We're very intrigued and about what you went through. How did it change your mindset, and how did it mold your future life? Because it happened at a very young age.
Well, first of all, I really appreciate the opportunity to share that story, because I think a lot of folks who enter into the field of oncology, we didn't come there just thinking, well, this seems like a good vocation. Most of us arrived there because of a very personal and often even painful story, whether it was something that happened to us directly or just someone near and dear to us. And so for me, I was pre-med. My interest was pre-med. As a sophomore, the summer before my sophomore in college, I was having ongoing symptoms that I was just being written off to be more conditions of my previous diagnoses of irritable bowel syndrome, thyroid dysfunction, rheumatoid arthritis, polycystic ovarian syndrome, endometriosis, all this collection of symptoms that were normalized to some degree or medicated to another degree, that when my symptoms got a little bit bigger and louder, it was just written off of a progression of those previous ailments. So it took about 6 months for someone to take a very different look. And that, unfortunately, was after an emergency acute situation where my roommate found me unconscious. And I'd been increasingly getting sicker and sicker, and no matter how many times I went to the ER, they just wrote me another script for a symptom that I was dealing with. So fast forward, I'm 19 years old, a few weeks shy of my 20th birthday. It's 1991. I'm a sophomore in college. And like I said, my roommate found me unconscious. And when he got me up enough to get me into the car and drive me to the urgent care, my oxygen levels were under 80. I looked like a 10-month-old pregnant person. The doctor took one look at me, who was on staff that night, and realized this was not more of the same. I'd become extremely cachectic, or just muscle wasting had occurred in just a matter of weeks. I was unable to eat. I had extreme pain, and when they did full-on visualization through imaging, saw that I had a complete bowel blockage. I had tumors throughout my entire abdomen, all over my liver. I had fluid buildup in my abdomen, in my heart, the fluid around my heart. I had fluid in my lungs. I had my right kidney was shut down because I had a tumor the size of a grapefruit in my right ovary pressing against that. So it was dire. You know, any doctor listening to this, even any patient listening to this conversation, recognizes how dire. And unfortunately, in the September of 1991, they explained to me that I was too sick and too far gone for even a conventional intervention. And so I was basically sent home to die. And I think where the story gets interesting is not that. A lot of people might think that part's the story that's interesting. But given that I was not given options, given that I didn't expect to live, given that I didn't even know how to fight something like this, what pivoted for me was I wanted to understand. I wanted to understand why a 19-year-old would have a diagnosis like this. I wanted to understand that by the time the official diagnosis rolled in on October 21st of 1991, of ovarian cancer, why no one was shocked that a 20-year-old had that diagnosis back in 1991. It was definitely not normal, and it was definitely not common. And so that is what led down the path of wanting to understand cancer. And I have still been on that journey for myself, coming on 35 years, as well as had direct hands-on care with tens of thousands of patients and indirect care of hundreds of thousands of patients around the globe, and helping them understand what the process was to allow them to have a cancer diagnosis.
Thank you for explaining that. So from going from a case of misdiagnosis, not given a chance to fight, fast forward, you went on a journey of education, hope, fight, resilience, become a doctor, oncologist, and here we are, trying to understand life, what it does to you, and you go through personal trauma and personal experiences. On the longest journey, tell us what your experience has been. And I know it's very hard to sum it in words sometimes. It's hard to explain what you've been through. But to the listeners that are out there, and how did you fight this? And you fought it on a supernatural level? I was to say, I've become elite in my field, and I want to help others. And that's where we are right now.
Such a great question. First of all, I want to just really clarify, I've never really considered for me and for the patients I've served, the concept of the fight, which is where our world in the oncology space, not just in the United States, but beyond, has a very kind of war mentality when it comes to battling cancer. So it was a global understanding and a global metaphor for something. But what we have learned is we are by no means winning any wars here. With cancer rates going up exponentially, it's now a matter of a flip of a coin as to whether you're going to have this diagnosis in your lifetime. And so clearly the waging of the war or the fighting it or the battling it mentality is probably not enough or not the right path to take. And so I want to clarify that for my own journey as well as for other people in my life. And so the understanding for me came around the concept of understanding cancer as a messenger and as an opportunity, and to understand that you didn't go to bed one night without cancer and wake up the next day with it. It's not like a light switch. It's a stacking process, an insidious sort of accumulation of insults to the body and to the psyche and to the soul that allow for vulnerability to take place, that allows for cancer cells to go rogue and to express.
Beautiful. Well said. And once again, congratulations. I mean, it's easy on hindsight to say, oh, you went through all of that and how you fought, but seeing it in real picture is beautiful. It's wonderful. And it really goes out as a strong message. When you're speaking from your personal experience and it resonates with someone, it's it speaks itself. So it's got its own heart. You mentioned, Doctor, about how you first of all started to question, you understood, you raised these questions, what's going on with my body? You had to overcome in between your mental side of things and recognizing life, which is honestly a lot of people in cancer who have that, we never have a time to think about those things, and we just go on and on with our lives like a robot. And then you start going, and you had that realization, and then you sat down and then you tried to figure out what's going on. Tell our audience, and I was curious to know, what did you learn later on about now there's a lot of hype about keto diet, how is insulin important, how does glucose affect, and they've all been coming up in discussions about the cancer itself. Tell our audience, how did it become mature, and what sort of role does it have now in your life?
Oh, it's a really powerful question. So what was emerging for me at that time is I recognized I had a lot of these, I was given a lot of labels, a lot of diseases at a very young age. I started to recognize that, my mom would tell me stories that I pooped once a month, but the doctors told her that was normal because that was just my pattern. So we normalized that, right? I started bleeding at 9. They normalized that. Well, that's just her pattern. And, like everything was just sort of like, they didn't really have an answer. So if they didn't have an answer, they just said, don't worry about it. It's just part of her pattern. So I think we do a lot of that in our culture is a check engine. We put a sticker over the check engine light until it's literally your vehicle, your body, falls apart on the side of the road. That's what it was like for me, right? But it was nothing in me ever thought I was sick along the way, despite having all of those labels. So that was really interesting. And then I started to go, well, what patterns are here? And is there a common thread between all these conditions? And that over time is turned into what I call my terrain 10, which are like the 10 main drivers or factors that lead to the expression of metabolic or mitochondrial dysfunction. And so let me take a brief moment and help people understand the way that I see cancer is not as Dr. Theodore Bovary in 1914 articulated it to be a genetic mutation issue, which is what we've hung our hat on for the past 110 years or so. But rather, I subscribe more to what Dr. Otto Warburg's findings were in the 1920s, which was the genetics were more of a downstream effect, not an upstream effect. And that misbehaving or misfiring or processing mitochondria may be more of the starting point. But even Dr. Otto Warburg and others since then haven't asked the question of, well, what made those mitochondria misbehave? That's what I've done. I've backed it up a little bit more, which is when I think about the mitochondria, we always think they're just the energy factories, and that's all we kind of give it attention to from our 6th grade biology class, right? But we've since learned that these little critters that we have co-evolved with for tens of thousands, if not some suggest upwards of 200,000 years, they started out as bacterium, and somewhere along the way we merged forces. They take upwards of 20% of our body composition. They're very important, and they do much more than just make ATP, just make energy. We have learned that they are major receivers of information. They're constantly scanning the world in, on, and around them, including people, places, and things, and endogenously as well as exogenously, so inside of us as well as outside of us. We, in our choices of our diet and our lifestyle, can impart that wisdom onto how our genes express. The way we eat, our metabolic drop in the bucket, if you will, what is at the end of your fork? What's the quality of it? What's the timing of it? What's the constituents of it? Are you more carb heavy or more fat heavy or more protein heavy or equalized across? We learn that some of our genetics respond better to a certain balance of those nutrients than others. And we also recognize at certain times in our life, we might need to forcefully use diet to push back or to enhance other therapeutic interventions. The third is the environmental, so the exposome. So today it's no longer a matter of if we have toxicity, it's how bad is it in us and how does it interface with all of our drops in the bucket. And then things like our microbiome, our immune system, inflammation, our circulation and oxygenation status, our hormonal modulation status, our circadian rhythm and stress biology, and our mental emotional experiences. Those 10 categories impart their noise, their wisdom, their signals, their input to the mitochondria, and the mitochondria make sense of them. But most of those things have a burden to the mitochondria that take those hits throughout the day, but over time they lose their stamina. They lose their resilience. And that is what turns into the chronic illnesses we have today, including cancer, but also things like cardiovascular disease, diabetes, obesity, autoimmune conditions, and neurological conditions, including dementia and Alzheimer's.
Excellent. So if I was to summarize that, I would say you just mentioned how a mitochondrial body is at the core of a body that was, in a way, implanted in us from the beginning. It was a modified, you said, exogenous substance. It became part of our body. It started becoming a central organ. It's receiving information, then it's producing energy, keeping us alive, and exporting energy. It's affecting our genetics, it's affecting our hormones and different things, and it's being influenced as well as it is influencing other parts of the things. Being such a critical, vital organ, you've emphasized about how ketosis, specifically glucose, plays a role in it. Would you explain our audience how does that, in relation to the diet that we consume, is important, just specifically on one of the aspects of your terrains that you've mentioned? I'm sure there are a lot of other parts that people want to listen to, but that is one that is specific.
Sure. Well, it's interesting. We know that depending on the research and the researchers, we know that 70 to 90% of all cancers are very what they call glycolytic in nature, meaning that they are sugar hogs. Okay, so we know that if you had to just take a good guess, you're probably going to get lucky if you start to carb restrict in people, because you're adding a level of stress to the environment of the body that's actually stress to the cancer cell, but not to the healthy cell. And then as such, when you carb restrict in those situations, you enhance whatever other treatments you bring on board, whether that's chemotherapy or radiation or targeted therapies or immune therapies, or whether that's even things like hyperbaric oxygen, high defied vitamin C, mistletoe, other quote unquote alternative or integrative therapies, respond better in an environment that has the additional pressure of being insulin depleted. Okay, so that's a really important piece here. for me, across the board, that's an easy lever to pull across, that we want to restrict carbs to some degree in every single cancer patient. Some cancer types are more of a sugar hog than others. And some need to be extremely restricted, like a glioblastoma, and most pancreatic cancers, and most late-stage cancers, by the way, no matter what they are. And surprisingly, people don't know this, but a lot are cancers of the blood. The leukemias and lymphomas have 200 times the insulin receptors on their cancer cells. So it's also a cancer type that responds very, very favorably to an extremely carb-restricted environment. Basically, doctors up until the 1960s fasted all their cancer patients. That went out of favor from the 1960s until recently, as doctors started telling patients a very different story, saying no matter what you do, don't lose weight. Yet today, 93% of us are walking around metabolically broken, and the biggest lever to pull there is our glucose metabolism and our insulin metabolism, which is a known driver. Insulin itself kicks up all kinds of growth factors. So when we can use one molecule that we make endogenously and can even supplement exogenously, we can enhance a better outcome with whatever tools we use in the toolbox of oncology.
Thank you for explaining that. I know we're running out of time, so a couple of quick questions.
Sure.
If ketosis, being in a ketosis state, meaning deprived of certain elements, and having fat, which we don't know at times, it could be visceral inside fat, percutaneous fat, is important, but both of them are very important. And then balancing that with your insulin and sugar levels is important. The question is, we want to get an idea, how can we recognize we're in an optimum metabolic state? Would there be any features, would you say, well, Amir, this is what you're going to watch for. You're not in a good metabolic state right now. This could be detrimental to your health. We know the mitochondria you mentioned is why it's important, but also the ability to fight cancer cells in itself. It's a problem. Tell our audience some signs which you say they need to be concerned. This is a time where you say you need to fix that.
I love it. Well, even standard of care defines metabolic health. They define that we are now, there was a study that came out in 2018 showing less than 12% of Americans are metabolically healthy. And then a study came out a few years later showing less than 7% are actually metabolically healthy. So we're getting worse, not better. That means the vast majority of us are already metabolically broken and we don't even know it. So Dr. Amir, I love that you're asking the question of what signs could we be looking for that we might be ignoring or just not aware of. So one of the simple ones is your blood pressure. Is it too high or too low? If it's elevated, that's showing some constriction in the vasculature, showing some problems with nitric oxide, some other elements that are really important for our vasodilation and movement of oxygen around the body. That's a problem. When it's too low, we're not getting good perfusion of oxygen around the body. When it's too high, we're getting a lot more rigidity in our vasculature, which causes problems of making us low oxygen in the future. Second one is our good old hip to waist ratio. So the idea is your waist smaller than or larger than your hips? That's something that you can easily measure with a tape. Measure or just look at yourself naked in a mirror, and know right then what that shows, because that is a very early indicator of visceral fat, which is the dangerous fat that you're talking about. That we might look skinny on the outside, but the inside we might be fat. So that's a big one. Our lipids. Now, we get caught up in the overall cholesterol number and we get caught up in the overall LDL number, but that's actually not where the magic happens for our metabolic health. Triglycerides are what we should be looking at, and anything over 90 is suggesting this patient is already sliding into one of the fastest growing conditions we know of today, which is, it's got various names right now, but it's now being called metabolic, steatotic hepatitis. So this is, it used to be called NASH, it used to be called fatty liver. It's getting fancier names as we're understanding it more as a metabolic disease, but that is an indicator when your triglycerides are elevated. If you are also feeling really taxed after a workout, if your stamina is really poor after a workout, that's another marker of metabolic mitochondrial dysfunction. And so those are things that we can be looking at. But also a quick one, I ask patients, can you go longer than 4 hours without a snack or a meal? If you can't, that's showing some metabolic inflexibility. If you are tired after a meal, that's a sign of metabolic inflexibility. If you have to have a snack to fall asleep, that's a sign of metabolic inflexibility. If you wake up in the middle of the night and have to eat, that's a sign of metabolic inflexibility. If you're not comfortable fasting 13 hours a day, meaning finish dinner at 7 p.m. and not have anything but water until 8 a.m., you have some metabolic flexibility issues. So those are the clues we can start to catch well before it's a building engulfed in flames.
Brilliant. So you're basically advocating you should be able to fast. You should be able to sleep comfortably as well. Schedule your meals, and if you're taking snacks in between, you should review your metabolic state again. And then you've given some physical signs and some blood work signs as well to keep up with your numbers. I think that's quite brilliant. I'm going to go to the next question because I know we've already almost ran out of time. And there are sort of like some myths from the myths that are around, and people want to know some answers. So what's your intake on how do you feel about them? So if you're ready, I can ask the first question.
Sure. So specifically,
Sugar.
Yeah, go ahead.
So there's specific sort of like,
Okay.
just a brief one-liner.
Got it.
Okay, first one. Sugar causes cancer.
It's not the cause, but it certainly gives cancer a leveraging point. And so when we pull that out, you can actually weaken the cancer.
Perfect. Fruit is dangerous for cancer patients.
It's not that it's dangerous, but we definitely need to check people's uric acid levels and fructosamine to see if fructose is a driver, as it can be for some patients with cancer.
Excellent. So check and balance it. Excellent. Artificial sweetness. A lot of hype about it, a lot of talk about it. They are safer than sugar itself.
Yeah. My preference is to find a quality one, like a pure monk fruit, or the allulose. Those are ones that seem to have not so bad impact on the gut microbiome.
They don't taste good.
I know, right, exactly. Although monk fruit and allulose taste way better than a lot of the xylitols and stevias.
But they both taste, the tastes are off basically. Okay, so explain that. So you're preferring those ones over the other ones.
Yeah.
Everyone with cancer should go with ketosis.
Good question. I would say that not everyone with cancer should eat a ketogenic diet, but everyone with cancer will likely be served well by getting in and out of ketosis from other means, such as intermittent fasting or exogenous ketone production.
Excellent. So thank you for differentiating that. Go in that state. It's not about the keto diet. Fasting can cure cancer.
I wouldn't say it cures, but I certainly think it's a very powerful lever to pull.
And the last one, cancer can be starved completely.
No, it will always, it's a hungry little bugger. It will always find a workaround. And so that's why you want to strengthen your terrain while you're kind of whack-a-moling the cancerous process.
Totally understand. Dr. Nasha, your final message to our audience.
I think it's kind of a full circle of where we started today, about the idea of when you're an educated person and you're an empowered person, you're a force to be reckoned with. And so I really want to leave the message that people are far, far more powerful than they perhaps have been led to believe.
Brilliant. It was a brilliant conversation. And for my audience, cancer is no longer just a disease of mutated genes. It's a profound reflection of our metabolic health. Dr. Winters, thank you very much for joining us today.
Wonderful to be here, Dr. Amir. Thank you, and thank you all for listening.
The challenge is taking active control of our internal terrain, making it a place where health can flourish and disease cannot survive. To our viewers, your lifestyle and your diet are powerful signals to your biology. You have more agency over your health outcomes than you have been led to believe. If you found this conversation eye-opening, subscribe to Khan Klinics and click the bell icon to continue exploring the future of medicine, science, and human vitality with us. This is Dr. Amir Khan signing off from Khan Klinics. Stay informed and stay empowered.